Hello there. Today I want to talk about productivity. And I don't think it's any big secret for anybody who knows me that I'm pretty good at getting stuff done. I've done 150 podcast episodes, nearly 200 blog posts. I just published my book number 31. And all of this has been as side projects compared to my kind of day jobs. So the question is, how do I get things done? And this is something people often ask me. Of course, it's complex. There's something about psychology, there's something about environment, there's something about training and skill, and a lot about luck. But if we kind of ignore these for the moment, I'm going to give you 5 of my productivity hacks. Maybe you'll find them useful. Maybe you'll think this doesn't apply to me. But these are 5 of kind of the things that I do or the mindsets that I have that allow me to produce things at a decent rate. Let's put it that way. The first one of these is, and this is super, super important, is to count the victories instead of the mistakes. Let's say you're doing a book. Many people have a wish of doing a book, but not a lot of people do so. One of the reasons they don't do it is, what if it's bad? What if there's spelling mistakes? What if the language is terrible? What if it doesn't sell? What if nobody likes it? What if? The reality is that if you look at it from a mistakes point of view, just like that sentence, then it's easy to get scared. Because then you're thinking, oh my God, all the things that could go wrong. Now that's because you're counting mistakes. If you're counting victories, it's pretty simple. Right now, how many books do you have? 0. What would be better than 0 books? 1 book. Would it be better if it had mistakes? Sure, because it would still be 1 book. So one of the key things that I preach is if you count your victories instead of your mistakes, you're going to end up with a lot more mistakes. True. I know very few people who've made as many mistakes as I have, but you're also going to end up with a lot more victories, with a lot more things done, with a lot more things you can point to and say, I actually did that, whether it's projects or whether it's products or concepts or whatever it is that you're passionate about. If you count victories instead of mistakes, you'll make more mistakes, but you'll also have more victories. The second thing, and this is something that you can find many other people saying, so it's not particularly original, is you shouldn't count. There's a mistake again. See, if we're counting them, we're already at 2. Notice how many I can get up to before we get through with this talk. The tricky thing is, I don't care. Number 2, you should take big tasks that are complex and make them into small tasks that are easy. If everything you have is something where you think, I could do that, then it's fine. There's an old story. There's an old legend. I don't know what we want to call it. There's an old story about 2 stonemasons, 2 people sitting and cutting rocks. And then somebody comes to visit. I think it's medieval, something like that, the story. And then the first one says, what are you doing? Why do you look so miserable? He says, are you kidding? I'm just sitting here cutting rocks. I'm just sitting here making bricks. How boring is that? My life sucks. So, okay, well, fair point. They walk over to the other one. He's also doing the same thing. And he's smiling. He's saying, why are you smiling? He says, me? Smiling? Because I'm building cathedrals. Now, of course, part of that story where it's usually used is about motivation and about how we should start with the why, to quote Simon Sinek, and how we should think of what is it we're doing, but why are we doing it? What's the bigger picture? That's part of it. That's great. You can use that for that. There's also another part. That is that if you're going to build a cathedral, if somebody said, Claus, build a cathedral, I'd say, architecture, structural support, airflows, material, budgeting. And then I'd say, I can't be at that meeting, sorry. Okay, knowing me, I'd probably say, yes, let's get going, and then see what we could do. But the thing is, building a cathedral is pretty hard, especially compared to creating a brick. But if you know how to create a brick, if you can break that task down into creating bricks and, of course, the other tasks that go with it, then you have an easier task of accomplishing them. What great producers do for events, part of what they do is they take something that's incredibly complex, produce the Olympic Games of 2024, And then they break that down. So at the end of the day, it ends up on somebody's table where it says, call Ryan and get him to take care of 20 meals for the German Olympic team who are meeting in conference room B at 16:45 on Tuesday. Make sure there's water and napkins. That's a pretty far cry from organizing the Olympics. But organizing the Olympics includes that sort of task. So break things down into smaller, simpler tasks that you're comfortable with. Because it doesn't really matter what you're doing, whether it's starting a podcast or it's writing a book or it's building a house or one of the things I'm doing right now, raising a child, is if you look at the big picture. Point one, some projects are never done, the child being one of them. Second part is they're insanely complex. But if you focused on things like get up in morning, feed child, put on fresh diaper, smile, give hug, then you've at least gotten through the first 10 minutes of the day. And then you can worry about the next 10 ones. So if you have big complex tasks, break them up into smaller ones. And if they're still too big, break them up into smaller ones. This is something I see killing off a ton of projects, especially book projects, ironically enough. Because people will say, I want to write a book. Okay, that's good. And it should have 4 chapters. Okay, great, 4 chapters, that's fine. So then they're sitting at the page thinking they now have a chapter of 32 pages and they don't know where to go. But if you break it down, so it's like, okay, write 400 words on this, 300 words on that, 700 on this, then they're like, oh, but I can do that. And if you have enough of those, then there's nothing in the project that they can't do. And I do this when I do book coaching. So take your big tasks, break them down into smaller ones. Now, this comes with a tricky second point. If you do that, if you break your big tasks down into smaller ones, you better be tracking progress instead of looking at completion. And the reason I say that is quite simple. Imagine that you are doing the Olympics. Let's say you're doing the Olympics. You are in charge of the Olympic Games. Sorry, going to sneeze. Humanity coming up. You are doing the Olympic Games for 2024. And you're tracking not just what you get done, you're tracking how much is left. When you track how much is left, that's fine, especially at the end of the project. And if you're kind of the big analytical mastermind who doesn't get scared by that. But for most of us, it's pretty crazy. It's really nice to be able to count forwards, to say, oh, we did this today, we did this today, we did this today, or we did this month, or this week, or this year. It's pretty nice to count upwards and see things building instead of seeing how much is left. And this goes in our daily lives for small things as well. One of the most satisfying feelings I know, and I know you can count me weird for this, but it's a really satisfying feeling, is vacuuming places that are really, really dirty. Vacuuming places that are almost clean, I hate that. I try to not do that if I can get away with it. I'm lucky enough that my better half is more vacuum oriented than I am. But one thing I like is I like taking places that are really, really dirty or really unstructured, or if there's a kitchen that looks like a mess, and then look at what gets done, not what's left. If I go into a kitchen and think, ooh, okay, there's 100 dirty plates and there's all this sort of thing, it's terrible, because then I'm like, okay, now there are 99 left, there are 98 left. Oh, I hate my life. That's why kitchens are terrible. But if you look at the stuff that's being done, oh, I did 1, I did 2, I did 3, I did 4, oh, I did 10, things are going so well. Then it's nice. That's why I love the vacuuming, because when you vacuum a piece of floor that before was dirty and there were crumbs and a little bit of hairball from a cat and some leftover small things that you don't even want to know what are, then you can see instant progress. Now, you could be in a huge warehouse. You could be doing a 1,000 square meter floor space. But when you look down and you see the vacuum cleaner going over a space and it goes from dirty to clean, oh, that's a nice feeling, because you're tracking progress. If you're tracking what's left, then you look up and then you see, oh, there's so much left. I've done nothing. I've been here for an hour and nothing has happened. That's terrifying. For some people, it's fine, and they make great overall project leaders. But for most of us, it's terrifying to look at what's left, especially in big things. But looking at what we're done, kind of keeping your nose down, keeping your head to the ground, and just work, 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 because then you see the progress. Then you get the satisfaction of like, copied that Excel sheet, or, oh, paid that bill, or painted that piece of the fence, or pressed those hands, or taught that class. That makes us happy. At least a lot of us, because we feel we're achieving things. So that's another tip, is look down. Once you know what you're doing, look down and count the achievements and be happy with the progress. Track the progress instead of the completion, especially if you can get away with it. Now, then this fourth tip is a thing that probably doesn't apply to everyone, but I really know that it applies to me, so maybe it applies to some of you as well. Have cheerleaders. The world is full of people who will give you criticism. Some of them will give it because you asked them. You say, can you look at this thing and tell me what to do better, or what you will like different? That's fine. That's no problem whatsoever. These are lovely people. Getting expert feedback, expert criticism, or even just non-expert criticism, that's great, especially when you asked for it and you're ready for it. But having people who pat you on the back and say, yeah, you did the thing, you're cool, you're awesome, the thing was great, we loved it, woo, that's super motivating. When you put out a thing and there are people in your network, maybe it's the people you live with, maybe it's some friends, maybe it's colleagues, maybe it's some people you've never met on the other side of the world, but they just like what you're doing. The feeling of one of them saying, yes, it's great, I love it, oh yeah, do more, it's really good. Where when you put out the same thing and somebody, their first comment before they've done anything else is, here's what you could different. Here's what you could do different. Here's what's wrong. Here's what I don't like. Here's why you're stupid. Here's why it's an idiotic endeavor. Why didn't you think of this? Why didn't you do that? It's great if you ask them, but if you don't, and you just get all that criticism handed to you, especially if it's by people you kind of like and trust and want to impress, that's tough. But having those cheerleaders, those people who egg you on to say, yeah, woo, you're the best, that is motivating. So I'd say have some cheerleaders and show them your work. Do the things, even if it's not complete, even if it's halfway there, even if you're not super satisfied with it. Have some people who enjoy seeing you put out work and who you can show it to and who will go, woo. And it's okay that some of them may not have critical sense about what you're doing. Maybe they're fans, maybe they're supporters, maybe they're just super positive people who'll say woo to anything. That's fine. Having people who pat you on the back is one of the things that keeps me going. And perhaps for some of you, that's the same. So make sure to have cheerleaders and not just critics. Finally, and this one's tricky because I'm going to probably step on a lot of toes here, but such is life. I think that it's pretty critical, if you want to be really productive, that you think like an athlete, not like an artist. And when I say that, I mean it the following way. If you're an artist, if you're like one of those really gifted people who does things, writing or painting or singing, or I don't even know what it is. I don't care. That's not relevant. You're an artist and you do things, you do art. Then there's a tendency among artists, and I know quite a few of them myself, they want to be inspired, they want to do their best work, they want to connect with something grand and eternal and bigger than themselves, and then they do the thing. Writer's block is something that is quite common for people who are into creative writing. Somebody who looks at a piece of canvas and says, not right now, the inspiration isn't there. And I understand that. I really get that. I sometimes sit there and think, what am I going to do? And that's where the athlete thinking comes in. I've played a bit of football, not on a high level. In fact, I was on a reality TV football team for people who were bad at football. But it does mean that I've played a bit over 100 games, scored a few goals even. But in that, why do I mention that? I mention that because when you're doing sports training, in this case football, then, and that's for you Americans, that's football, soccer, not football, quarterback. No. football, soccer. When you train things there, when you do deliberate practice, which football players do a lot of to get good, then you do the thing that's in front of you. Sometimes you're really feeling it, and other times you're not. If you're practicing doing corner kicks, this is something we did at football practice. We'd practice doing corner kicks. So if you're the one doing the kick, you'll kind of trot out to the corner, somebody will throw you a ball, you'll make sure everybody's ready, and then you'll run up and you'll kick that ball, and you'll watch it sail in, and hopefully something magical will happen in front of the goal. If you don't watch enough football to understand that metaphor, that's fine. The important thing is you run up to the ball, you kick it, and you see it go. And you do your best. Sometimes you feel when you're kind of running close to it, you feel, I'm going to hit it perfectly. This is going to be a great shot. I feel it. This is the kick of kicks. And sometimes you're like, okay, this is not going to be good, but I'm going to do it anyway. Nobody has kicker's block when they're standing at that corner. They may do it well, they may do it badly, they may be lucky, they may be unlucky. There are many things that can happen, but nobody stands there and says, I have kicker's block. The same goes for people who do performance professionally. When you're going to sing on stage, when you're going to dance the ballet, when you're going to do anything where you have to perform, professionals do that. That's part of what makes them professionals. They do that because if they didn't, they'd usually not get away. If you're kind of your lead opera singer, you're producing Wagner, and your lead opera singer says, nah, I'm not in the mood. Call me back in half an hour. It doesn't really work because the show is going on. Taking that mindset, that athlete mindset, or you could also just call it that performing artist mindset, and putting it into the work you're doing when you're just on your own, when you're behind the stages, when you're not in front of the crowd. That's pretty critical. It means if I sit down and I know I have to write a mail, I may hate it. Sometimes I do. Let's be fair. Sometimes I do. But I do my very best to get it done. And if I don't get it done, I know that it's because I chose to do something else. I can do it badly. Yes, that's fine. I can do something that's subpar, that's not up to what I'd like to do. That's fine. But I get it done. And of course I fail. I'm human. I fail tons of the time. I have tons of things lying there like, I didn't get that done, or I didn't get this done, or this, I thought, okay, I can't send it out yet because it's not ready. I fall into all the same kind of pitfalls as everybody else. But saying to yourself, don't wait for inspiration. Do stuff. And then when inspiration strikes, that's great. Then just, go for it if you can. But don't wait for it. Do things even when you're uninspired. Think like an athlete, not like an artist. Or think like one of those artists who thinks like this, and then we're hopefully above the stepping too much on people's feet level. Finally, thank you for listening to this. These were 5 of my productivity tips, and I honestly don't know if you'll find them useful or not. But I'd love you to try. I'd love you to test out some of this stuff if you can. So if there's any of this where you feel, I can give that a try, then be my guest and feel more than free to write to me and tell me how it went. Thank you for listening.